Hey everyone, so I just want to do a quick video showing you how I put together some MLA citations. So you can come back to this as you're building your own MLA citations, or you can just see it once and have a feel for how it works. So I'm going to do 2 citations. I'm going to do one from scratch, and I'm going to do one with a citation generator that was on a database that I need to edit. And you'll see that I'm on the notes from the day that we talked about MLA for the first time, which was February 25th. And so these notes are in Canvas if you want to look at them. But this information about the format of MLA is also all over the web. You can find it via OWL Purdue. There's links to it in our resources in CO150 on our Canvas page as well. I'm going to kind of fly through these. Keep in mind you can slow down the video, you can pause it, but I just want it to be quick if you just want to watch it one time. Alright, let's start with a for scratch citation. So I have a New York Times article here. It's pretty simple. Author, title, it's from the New York Times, you got the date. Not a ton of crazy information that I'm going to need to include, and so it's actually going to be easier for me to just do this one from scratch. If you want to use a citation generator for things like this that don't have one attached, that's fine, but I'd just let you know that you're going to have to do more work sometimes correcting it than if you just type it in yourself. Okay, so let's just review. We're going to start with author, then a period, then the title of the source, then a period, and then title of the container and a comma. Okay, so let's start with our author. Scroll down. You're going to do last name first, comma, first name, period, and then the title of the article. Normally this would end in a period. I'm just going to let the question mark stand in for the period here because it would look a little weird to have a question mark and then a period. You could do it that way as well and it wouldn't necessarily be incorrect. I'm not going to include this big long sort of subheading because I think of this as more of like a blurb than an actual subtitle, but you could include it. You would just include it inside the quotation marks here as well. So then we know this is published in the New York Times, so that's going to be the publication. And that one's going to be followed by a comma. And that one is going to be in italics because it is the name of a published body of work. So anything that's a journal, newspaper, magazine, book, anything like that that's the larger source is going to be in italics. Let's look back at ours. So other contributors. I don't actually have any other contributors that I even know about with this source, much less that are relevant to my audience, so I'm just going to skip it. Version. So this is mostly going to refer to if you have something like a volume in a journal or a particular issue of a magazine. This isn't going to apply to this because it's not an actual edition of the New York Times that came out in print. I don't see any information giving the edition other than the date, which is its own category. So we're going to skip version. So notice how for a lot of your sources, you're going to skip some of these categories and it's going to be really simple. So then we have publisher, and this is one of the ones that you're going to run into a lot, which is that the publisher would be the New York Times. Whoop. I can't type. Okay, the New York Times. But note how silly that looks. The New York Times, the New York Times. Your audience doesn't need to see that twice. It's just adding bulk to your citation. It's not giving them any new information. So in cases where your publisher and your publication are the same, which is going to be true for a lot of newspapers and things like that, you can just skip it. If you are using something like, say, a podcast episode or something that is going to be published by a larger company, make sure you look and make sure that there isn't a network. One of the best ways is the title of the publication the same as the title of the entire web page, or are you seeing the title of a publication and then the title of a web page? You can also poke around in like about info for that, but for here we're going to skip it. We don't have an edition or a version. Then we're going to put the publication date, which is 2020. Note that it's March 7th, I think. Oh, March 6th, 2020. There isn't anything in this article that makes it really specific to March or to the spring, and so I'm not going to include that because it just takes up space and my audience doesn't need it. This brings us to our last category, location. So this is the weirdest one. Keep in mind that this is any information your audience might need to know how and where you access the source. The first thing I'm thinking of here is that I have a New York Times Online subscription. And so my audience might not be able to see this as clearly as I can without paying for it or anything like that. So I'm going to put access to via New York Times Online subscription. And then a period. So you'll put a period after the location. Even if you have multiples, you'll just put a period after each one. That will help my audience know that they may run into a sign-in wall or something that will prevent them from seeing this. Alright, and then finally, we don't have page numbers since this is a web source, so I'm just going to put this web link. Since this is a normal web page, it's most likely that my audience will be able to access it again with no problems. I can just put in the actual link. If the link is a mile long, you may try to see if there's a simpler link or a permalink. And for journal articles, you're going to need to make sure that you have some sort of permalink or DOI. But now I have my citation. Looks good. We need to do one last thing, which is to go into paragraph options and select hanging indent. That's going to indent all the lines after the first line. And what's great about that is it makes it really easy for audience to see the part of the citation that's going to show up in text and then find that citation in your works cited. So there you go, completed. And see, that didn't take me very long, and it would take me less time if I wasn't explaining it out loud. So sometimes it's worth just doing it from scratch. I'll remove the link because I think it makes it look neater, but you don't have to do that. Alright, and then here's another source that I found that's from a peer-reviewed journal. So this one is from Google Scholar, and I know that there is going to be some sort of citation generator, most likely. They won't all have that, but so I'm going to look for share and cite. Sometimes it'll say get citation. The academic search premier version is pretty easy to find. Now I want an MLA citation and it doesn't immediately show up here, so I'm going to stick MLA in here and see what I find. You can see a bunch of them and it's not totally sure which one is going to be more accurate, so you could try them out. This one says 6th edition. We know we're on 8 now, so that's probably not going to be the best one, and that gives us a heads up that some of these might be outdated, which is going to be why you're going to get errors a lot of the time. I'm going to pick this one because it says with URL, and why not? I could use the URL. Alright, this looks functional, so I'm going to copy and paste it into my document. I'm going to get rid of the formatting, even though that will get rid of some of the formatting that I want to keep, because I can stick it back in there. So now it matches the rest of my works cited. Okay, so now you will be tempted to walk away, done, you got your citation. But this is actually incorrect in a lot of ways. So this is why you need to have this information in front of you and be willing to edit it if you're going to use a citation generator. So the first thing I notice, if you go back to our notes, you'll see that for sources with more than 2 authors, or with 3 or more authors, same difference, you're going to use et al. So this has 3 authors, but they've listed them all. So we're actually going to just get rid of these 2 people. Sorry, guys. And put et al. In place of it. That basically just means and others, and it helps keep your citation short, and it's going to make sure that your in-text citations are quicker as well. Then we have the title. This looks proper. It looks like it has the subtitle, all is well, so I'm just going to leave that. Then we have the name of the journal, which is Sustainability. I'm going to put that back in italics, and this one's going to be followed by a comma, so make sure you add punctuation if it's not there. Now this is going to be probably the most confusing thing with the generated citations from journal articles. You're going to see just like these random strings of numbers. So I've got 12.9 and then I've got 3616. What is that? If you look here, this shows you the information for the actual version of this journal, and they're all going to look different depending on the journal, and oftentimes you're not going to know exactly what it means, and that's okay. But I know that this was an issue of this journal, Sustainability, that was published in 2020. Some version of it was 12.9.3616. Probably this is a volume and an edition or something like that. I'm going to get rid of 2020 right here because we're going to put that where the publication date goes. And I'm going to actually add vol because that indicates volume. I'm putting that there because I didn't immediately know what these numbers were, and so maybe my audience won't either. And now they still have those random numbers, but it at least tells them like this is part of the volume or the edition. Okay, and then that one's a comma instead of a period, so I fixed that. You'll see it's inserted cross-ref, which is something that we used in old versions of MLA. It may still be used, but you probably won't need to use it. This is where, for some reason, this is an article that's cross-referenced across multiple journals, so maybe it was published in multiple journals. Your audience doesn't really need to know this here. I didn't see any mention of this anywhere that seemed relevant, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And then we have another holdout, which is that this is web. So this is something you may have done in the past. This was an old MLA requirement, which is you had to say whether it was a print or an online source. But we don't need to do that anymore, so we're going to get rid of that as well. Now let me go back to my list and see what we've got. Okay, so we've got version. Now we're on publisher. Who is the publisher? So like I said, sometimes you can get a hint from looking around. So we've got this MDPI. I'm not totally sure though whether or not this is a publisher for this journal or whether this is just like a site hosting the journal. So I'm actually going to consult my PDF version, which having a downloaded PDF version can be really helpful. And here I see this as well. If I click on MDPI to get some about info, I'll find out that they do publish multiple journals, and so that is going to be my publisher. So I'm going to put in MDPI. And then finally, the publication date we know is 2020, and then we're on location again. So first thing I need to know is that this is a PDF. This was published in an actual journal, and so this does have page numbers. So you're going to see page numbers on it. Luckily for us, because of how this document is formatted, I don't know if this was how the original was, but the version we have it's just 1 through 18, which is easy. Sometimes you'll get page numbers that are like, this was on page 342 to 368. Okay, so we're going to put PP 1 through 18. So that'll go in location as well because that's part of like where you found, and it'll try to capitalize it, and you can tell it no. So that's part of how they're going to find exactly what you used. Then the next thing is just like I did with the first article, they need to know what specifically did I use to access this. So I'm going to say accessed via Google Scholar. Keep in mind that if you didn't use a CSU database or you didn't have to log in and there was nothing blocking you from accessing it, it was a public access article, you can skip this part altogether. Make sure that if your citation generator puts in EBSCOhost, you switch it out for, say, Academic Search Premier or the name of the actual database you used. EBSCOhost hosts a bunch of databases, and so telling them that you found it at EBSCOhost is like saying, I found it at the mall, instead of saying which store you found it at the mall. So it's not as helpful. And then we have the link. I'm going to get rid of these carets because they're not necessary for our audience to actually put that link in their bar. Bam! There we go. So see how many changes I had to make that correct. It didn't take me long, but I did have to make changes. And some of them really helped clean up and make the citation more clear. So they're not just arbitrary things that I'm asking you to do. They actually do help your audience understand your citation. I hope this was helpful, and happy citing!